Hey guys, this is Substitute Topher. Today we're out in Napa Valley, California, driving the brand new 2025 Infiniti QX80. I'm here with Mason from Car Confections, and we're getting the chance to give you guys some super early driving impressions here on this brand new, from the ground up, Infiniti QX80 flagship SUV. So we're gonna walk you around this thing, and then we'll take it out on the road and we'll show you what it's like to drive. This has a brand new powertrain, 3.5 liter twin turbo V6 VR35 DDTT. It's a totally new engine, loosely related to what you'd see in the Infiniti Q50 and Q60 Red Sport and the GTR, but it is its own engine. It makes 450 horsepower and 516 pound-feet of torque. Power is sent to all four wheels via a 9-speed automatic. So this is a pretty big departure from what we have seen over the past 15 years of the last QX80. This car hasn't been new since 2010. So when Infiniti invited us out, of course, we were super excited to see what they had going on with this new generation. So let's jump out, walk you around this thing, and then we will get in. We'll go for a drive and show you what it's all about. So here's the outside. It's currently in its entry-exit mode, so it is pretty slammed down to the ground. I think it looks quite proper. This is the autograph trim, so this is the top trim level. This one as spec is about $112,000. So it ain't cheap, but at the end of the day, it is the big body-on-frame flagship SUV. And it's still unapologetically Infiniti QX80. It isn't a huge departure from the Infiniti design language that we've been getting for the past 10 or so years. So it's still quite recognizable as a Infiniti QX80. Now, this is kind of a big interest for me because I love big flagship SUVs like this, and we drove a 2022 or a 2023 QX80 a couple of years ago on the channel, and I emerged from that experience thinking, that car is excellent. And what I loved so much about the outgoing QX80 is that it still had that old V8 flagship SUV sort of 04 rich charm to it. And well, I'm excited to show you all what this new one drives like. It is certainly a departure, again, like I've said a million times, from the old QX56/QX80 that we had for so long, but everything's got to be new at some point, and Infiniti was definitely due for an upgrade here on this QX80. Let's pop the hood and we'll show you this 3.5 liter V6, and then we'll jump in the back seat. We'll show you cargo room and everything like that. So here it is, our VR35 DDTT engine. Honestly, a pretty attractive engine bay. They haven't gone overboard with the plastic cladding, and everything appears to be pretty honest. Big single intake over here on the right-hand side. And this is up about 50 horsepower from the outgoing naturally aspirated 5.6 liter V8 that was in this car since the beginning of time. So it's a little weird driving this thing with a V6, I'll be honest, and that 9-speed automatic shifts a lot differently than the outgoing 7-speed that we had in the older QX56 and QX80. Okay, so let's talk design for a second before we show you the back seat. The headlights are inspired by keys on a piano. The grille is inspired by a bamboo forest. And then when we walk around back, this sort of like long strip taillight back here is inspired by the skyline of a city. So kind of like all the buildings there. So that's the little blurb we were given earlier, but I think overall it's a pretty mature and pretty safe design. I think that they kind of played it safe here, and that's not always a bad thing. You don't always have to make some crazy statement. I think the kind of mature and safe nature of this design fits the vibe here with the QX80. So let's pop the very large hatch. This car has gotten a little bit bigger for the 2025 model year. It's about 2 inches longer than the outgoing truck. You can see we have our backpacks back here behind the third row. You do get a bit more room behind the third row. Of course, you've got more room behind the second row as well. As you start folding these seats down, it becomes more and more cavernous in this thing. So let's fold all these down and we'll show you what kind of storage you have back here. And then we'll take a seat in these third row seats. and we'll show you what room is like. But with all the seats folded down, we do have captain's chairs here in the middle of this autograph trim. And Mason, do they all have captain's chairs?
They all come standard with captain's chairs.
Okay.
You can get bench seating on the 3 lower models.
The 3 lower trim models. Okay, that's right. Okay, so yeah, this is the top trim. There are 3 trims below this that start from kind of the high 80s and range all the way up to this car, which is 112 grand. So you can see all of our room here with everything folded down. Let's fold everything back up. They make it pretty easy here, and I'm always one to complain about power folding 3rd row and 2nd row seats because it just kind of adds some complexity to everything. But these actually fold up and down pretty quickly, and the buttons are straightforward. You don't have to hold or anything. You just tap all the buttons once, and it gets the job done for you. You also have these buttons right here to raise and lower the air suspension. If you are loading something into the back of the QX80, you can make your load surface a little bit lower to easily slide things in and out of the trunk. So let's shut this. Normal sort of Nissan and Infiniti sounds, beeps and bongs as you open and close things. Here's our fuel filler. This thing is rated for only about 19 miles to the gallon. So even though we have a smaller displacement and a couple of turbos, it doesn't really make this thing that much more efficient. It is still a big 3-ton rolling brick, and well, that certainly shows in the fuel economy. This is in its lowest mode right now, but when you lift it up into its highest mode, its off-road setting, we have up to 10 inches of ground clearance. Off-roading is not really the focus of this big flagship truck, but if you needed to get over some things like drive up into a vineyard or something in Napa, you're able to do that. And we'll show you some of the camera systems and stuff as we kind of finish our tour here on this QX80. We have these door handles that go flush with the car when you are driving. And I'll be honest, they do feel a little bit cheap when they are popped out when you're actually using them here, but they look really cool and slick when they are popped in. Okay, this is my first time operating this. Let's see if I can do this right to get back into the 3rd row. Let's see, that gets out of the way. That's a pretty good amount of room to get back here. Okay, nice. All right, we're gonna jump over here behind this seat, show you guys the 3rd row seat room. These headrests pop up, and at 5'11", I do actually surprisingly have enough headroom back here. You've got the O handles right here next to our vents. You've got 2 cup holders on either side. You've got a USB-C port back here. You've got pretty much everything you need, and these seats are heated as well. So I always like to see some heated 3rd row seats in a big flagship SUV. 2nd row seats have a bit more tech, so we'll jump up there and we'll show you what those are all about. Let's put this headrest down so we can see where we're going later. One thing I want to note before I jump into the 2nd row is that this QX80 is not available with power running boards, which I don't think is all that bad, because every time I see a vehicle with power running boards that's more than like 4 or 5 years old, they're stuck in the down position and they look like crap. But of course you could argue that pretty much everything else in the segment does offer them, so kind of just got to judge that for yourself and what you think the value in that is. Personally, I don't mind just having some fixed in place running boards. Sitting in the back seat here, we have a number of controls with this captain's chair. Set up back here, we have an entire tablet to control our 2nd row seats. These are heated, they're ventilated, and they're massaging. I'll come right out and say it, the massaging seats in this car are nothing to write home about. I was a little bit disappointed to find out that they don't really have any massage balls or anything. It's kind of more of just a lumbar going psh, psh, psh on the seat. We also have a center console back here, which we have filled with things currently because we've been on the road all day doing the tour of Napa Valley. We've got some cup holders back here, but everything seems to work pretty nicely in this this little rear infotainment display. No real complaints with that. It's all pretty straightforward. There's not a ton of menus in here. Seat massage. Left seat, you've got 3 levels of intensity. You also have a climate control panel back here with some physical buttons, which is nice to see. I guess that's it for the 2nd row. So let's jump up to the front, and we'll take this thing out on the road and show you what it's like to drive. For tires, we have a 275 section tire on a 22-inch wheel. This is a squared 275/50R22 setup on some Bridgestone Alenza all-season tires. Pretty good fit for a car in this class, and they've done the job just fine today. They're pretty quiet and they handle this beast with some grace. Up front, we have a burgundy interior, and the first thing you notice on these front seats is the Klipsch headrest speakers. The top trims of the QX80 come with a 24-speaker Klipsch audio system, and they're kind of working their way into the automotive world right now, with the Ram Tungsten being the first car available with it, and now into Infiniti's QX80. So we've listened to it a little bit on the way here, and we'll play you guys a demo a little bit later in the video and show you what it's like. We've got some pretty good adjustment here on the driver's seat. These are massaging in the front. We can adjust our bolsters with this switch. We have lumbar that goes up, down, in, and out. And of course, we have our normal 4 ways here with those physical buttons. I do like the use of physical buttons in this QX80 overall. There's still a lot that you can do with that. We're not seeing everything migrate into these dual 14.3-inch infotainment systems, one of which just being your cluster, the main infotainment here being in its normal position. Also, no soft closed doors in this thing.
That was interesting.
Yeah, we were poking around a display unit last night, and I was trying to shut the door, and I was like, why is this not soft closing? But no soft closed doors. We do have a power adjust steering column. That's always nice to see, and in my opinion, necessary for any car that's like over 60 or 70 grand. Should always have a power adjust steering column. Materials up here feel pretty nice. The leather on the steering wheel is very soft. It's quite a large steering wheel, but it's appropriate for being on a big 3-ton behemoth of a car. We've got steering wheel mounted paddle shifters that you can access by putting this thing into manual mode with our little push button shifter down here. Okay, let's talk this center console, because it sticks up really high and it makes this car feel a little bit bigger inside, in my opinion. For example, it's a little bit harder to reach over to the glove box, and the biggest complaint by far is that they haven't really padded this very well. You can hear it's all pretty stiff. I mean, you have a little bit of padding here on the center console, but the most natural place that Mason and I have found to rest your elbow is right here on this section. That is pretty stiff, so it does get a little bit uncomfortable in here. But otherwise, the left-hand side is pretty squishy, and it does everything else ergonomically pretty much all right. I don't think I have any other ergonomic complaints on this. Climate control panel is on a slightly smaller 9-inch display here below our 14.3-inch display. We've got a physical button for our hazards. That's another thing. When you rest your arm down on the center console, it oftentimes opens the little trap door that holds your phone if you are wiring in for CarPlay. We do have wireless CarPlay on this Google-based system. That's another thing. I kind of wish maybe they would have switched this around so that the opener was on this side, so it wasn't as easy to bump, but it is what it is. Over here we have some cup holders. Additionally, I've got to say before we get on the road, I appreciate the design language here on the dashboard. They have kind of made a point to bring some nice elements here into, kind of the materials and the way that the infotainment flows, which, to be honest, kind of reminds me of a Mercedes GLS through here. Very similar sort of lines coming from the infotainment. And then speaking of mimicking some German cars, look at the design of this cluster. This is straight from a BMW. It's like designed exactly the same. You are able to change this and make it look a little bit different with just kind of a normal setup with some gauge pods and then a calm display as well. And we'll go through those when we're on the road. But speaking of that, let's end this walk around. Let's get this thing out on the road and we'll see what it's like to drive. We've been sitting in this parking lot. Flagships always take forever to do the walk arounds on because there's always just so much to show. Parking brake is on. So the first thing I noticed upon driving this thing earlier today is the steering's a little bit weird, because normally when you're in a car like this, you look for the steering to be really light and precise, which under first impressions this is, because when you're turning while completely stationary or going like under 5 miles per hour, this is pinky light steering. I mean, this is like properly light. But as soon as you get the car up to, I don't know, 10 miles an hour or so, it weights up. So I think it prematurely weights up a little bit. And I don't know, I would like to see a little bit more lightness at lower speeds. But for the most part, the steering is calibrated all right. And you'll see some of that once we get out onto this canyon road here. Throttle response is a little touchy at low speeds as well. I found myself kind of jolting from red lights and things, so you definitely have to modulate your foot a little bit more than I would like to do with a car like this. They've really gotten this thing dialed in with this new 4-corner air suspension, adaptive dampers on this car, which do stiffen up when you put it into sport mode. We're gonna feel the width of this car right now.
Back online. You are on the fastest route.
Thank you so much.
You should reach your destination by 2:28 p.m.
That's so great. Thank you. Also, on the topic of steering, one thing I'd like to see from pretty much any flagship in this class is some rear wheel steering. And I think with the size of this behemoth, it could definitely benefit from some rear wheel steering to make it a bit more maneuverable. Otherwise, though, pretty good manners at low speeds. We have dual paned glass on this car, so the cabin is super quiet, very isolated in here. We also have a camera rear view mirror on this car, as we should. All right, let's get this thing out on a canyon road and see how it can handle. Will you put me into sport mode, please, sir? It does help to have an assistant because the drive modes are in the climate control panel. Which
there we go.
Sounds kind of funny, thank you. So sport mode is going to do a couple of things. It's going to give you a little bit more weight in the steering, which does not give you any more feel, but it does weight it up slightly. Additionally, it stiffens up these adaptive dampers, so it mitigates quite a lot of your body roll. Pretty impressive to hustle this thing. The V6 itself, it's a little grainy, and it does sound like any other Nissan when you are at high RPMs. Some of that is pumped through the speakers, which I'm not a big fan of. I think for a car like this, if anything, you should be trying to hide the fact that there's even an engine under the hood, unless it is something a bit more luxurious than a V6. So I don't love hearing the shriek, the trumpets of the 350Z coming through the speakers of this thing.
I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, see, but then on the other end of the spectrum, Mason likes it.
We just had a Nissan Z on loan not long ago, and if I close my eyes, maybe.
If you close your eyes, you're
I can teleport back.
in a Nissan Z. Hey, it's the same. It's also got a 9-speed. It's also a turbo V6. Let's come to a quick stop here, and we'll see how this QX80 gets off the line. Pretty good punch there. I would say this has about the right amount of power for a car in this class. You don't always need gobs of power from these cars, and I would say that the power level here is adequate. Am I a big fan of the power delivery in the V6? It's okay. It's not super linear. The 9-speed is a little bit lazy. And you know, when you're thinking of other cars that this compares to, Mercedes GLS, BMW X7, I know those aren't body-on-frame SUVs, but they are still competitors. They are still flagships. Those cars are a bit more precise. It does leave me longing a little bit for some extra performance. Ooh, it's a big car. It's a big car, but what I love about this suspension, this air suspension with the adaptive dampers, is it does mitigate enough of that body roll to where you don't feel like you're going to put this thing up onto two wheels or understeer off and crash off the cliff. It is confidence inspiring enough. The steering, not a ton of feel on center. I mean, it's pretty numb. Again, though, I mean, you have to remember this is a big flagship body-on-frame SUV, and they have gone through and they've made this frame a little bit more rigid. So coming from the old QX80, you don't have as much vibration over the bumps. There's not as much cowl shake, back and forth sort of movement from this. So the overall ride quality is certainly better. It does feel more upscale than the outgoing car.
I think that it's really shines on the lower trim level side of things.
That's a good point. The biggest draw to this car is the value proposition on the lower trim cars that you can get with rear-wheel drive and get about 70% of the options that you get on this autograph trim level for $85,000, $90,000.
Yeah.
What's the trim you would?
Yeah, I would definitely get the Lux trim.
Lux.
It starts at around 89 grand, so you're saving like, what is that, $22,000 over this autograph version, and you get like most of the features: head-up display, heated vented seats. You're still getting the panoramic moonroof, the 360 camera standard, the whole powertrain setup, the power rear seats. Those are also standard on Lux. So I think that most of the features that a buyer would be looking for in this segment are included on that trim level, and I think that's going to be definitely the most popular trim level.
That's a really good point, and I think that's something that we often overlook because we're always given the top trim cars, and like that's what we have to go off of. So it almost skews the perception of value in a lot of these vehicles, and I wish that sometimes they would bring a couple different trim levels out so we can kind of compare and like see what makes the most sense. But the autograph trim, it's a bit much. I don't really see the value in it. Okay, well, as we're just cruising here, let's show you a couple of the different settings, some of the different cluster views, and then we'll test out this Klipsch 24 speaker 3D sound system. Now, 24 speakers is a lot, and to be honest with you guys, I don't always love sound systems that have a ton of speakers. Sometimes quantity of speakers is not really the ticket. It's not really what makes things sound really good. What it does help with is complexity, and if they have tuned this thing properly, then it should be a treat. We'll get to that in just a second, but I do first want to show you some of our different controls and displays here with the cluster. So we have this button here on the right-hand side of the steering wheel, which allows you to control your infotainment, and you can use your little dial here to scroll through all of your different menus. I can go to my CarPlay, which I have up right now. But then you can also use this button panel to control your cluster. So something like this is nice for a car like this. In my opinion, the infotainment is a little bit far away. It's kind of a far reach. So it's nice to have another option to control that. That's going to drive me nuts if that's going to be beeping at me the whole time. Go away. When we have it set for the actual cluster screen, though, you can scroll through a number of different screens here to display whatever you'd like to see. Let's go into settings and we'll show you some of our different cluster designs. So we have this right now in what's called dynamic. Let's put it into elegant. So elegant is just kind of your regular run-of-the-mill gauge pod, sort of circular gauges there. Or we can go into enhanced. And enhanced gives you this kind of like sunset display that goes across both of our 14.3-inch displays. I think the vibe is kind of ruined by this little separation though in the middle, because it is two dual screens. I think it would look a lot better if it was one big continuous screen, which they try to kind of fake it and make it look like it is, but it is two separate screens.
I think at night that'll show up a lot.
Oh yeah, that's going to show up a lot at night. Speaking of at nighttime, there are 64 ambient lighting colors in this thing.
Yep.
So a lot of adjustment there for ambient lighting. We got the chance to see this car last night. It is pretty striking at night. Some of the headlight animations and welcome sequences are pretty nice. You know, don't think that Infiniti isn't trying. You know, they've given this car a good effort, and they started developing this thing around 2017, 2018, so it has been a long time coming, and you can definitely see their effort here.
It's a similar ETA.
All right, here we go. Okay, another thing. This turn signal returns to center, which I'm never a fan of, but especially not in this car. It feels a little bit bouncy, a little bit cheap, and what's wrong with turn signals that just stay in the same place? BMW kind of experimented with this around 10 years ago, coincidentally when this car was being developed. And I think maybe they were taking some inspiration from the Germans on that, and it's kind of where they got that from, but I don't know. I'm not a big fan of how that feels. When you're sat in traffic like this, you do have an option to auto hold. That button is right down by your parking brake, so that's in a pretty convenient location. You can also toggle on and off your auto start stop with a physical button over here on the left-hand side of the steering wheel. I usually leave mine off, but the transition is pretty decent in this car. No mild hybrid or anything going on here, but it does fire up and come to life in a pretty smooth manner. Let's get another quick acceleration in here. While the 9-speed is a little bit lazy, the shifts are really smooth, and we haven't really had any hiccups today in our few hours, you know, any missed shifts or rough shifts. Tuning for comfort in this car does seem to be pretty nice. You can take control of the 9-speed yourself by pressing the D button once again. I just opened that cubby. I put us back into sport mode here. Yeah, the reactions are a little bit delayed when you start doing that. But you do at least have that option to manually shift the QX80. You know what? Honestly, these are not any more delayed than I would expect. I think the tuning on this, when you're in manual mode, when you're on throttle, this delivers shifts about as quickly as I would expect it to. The biggest plus with this car, and my biggest takeaway, is they've done a fantastic job with this ride. I think that the adaptive dampers paired with the air suspension, it's a really good combination for daily driving, obviously, which is what this car is meant for. It soaks up all the bumps nicely. It is damped pretty soft, but sometimes you want to be floating along the road if you're on a road trip, if you're just on kind of a boring straight section of highway. It is really nice. But they've tuned it in such a way that when you go into sport mode, it does mitigate enough of that body roll to make you feel comfortable on a back road and not stressed out, which I really do appreciate. But I do wish these were leather wrapped. Can we agree on that?
Yeah.
These need to be leather wrapped for 112
feels
grand.
Out of place with the suede headliner and everything else.
Oh,
with leather.
the headliner is so nice.
Yeah.
Nice suede Alcantara material. We have, you know, a ton of nice, even like the tops of the door panels are leather, the top of the dash is leather. There's a lot of nice materials in here. And then you see something like this and you're like, come on, you gotta stick with the theme in here and, you know, kind of wrap everything up nicely and keep it consistent. But what can you do? I also really like the contrast red leather on our airbag cover with the stitching here. Leather wrapped as well, just looks really nice. Overall design of the steering wheel is good. Feels nice in the hand, like I said earlier. And I like a 2-spoke design because you can drive like this and kind of just, you know, hang out. If you're on a long trip, even though your right elbow is in agony driving this car, you are still able to rest your hand, or you can drive with your left hand, which is what I'd strongly recommend. And you've got quite a bit of cushion there, and you're still able to drive this car well. Another thing I really love about this QX80 is the visibility. I think all of this pairs really nicely with the seating position. You sit up nice and high. It's pretty commanding. You can see the front of that hood, even with the seat all the way down. I'm 5'11", and I have great visibility out of this car. You can see even with this mirror adjusted out of its camera setting, really open greenhouse in this car. And it's something that you don't really get from a lot of these newer vehicles, is sometimes they're kind of hard to see out of. My good friend Dane has a 2000 Lexus LX, and what I love the most about driving that car is how easy it is to see out of. And I'm kind of getting those vibes here from this QX80 with the seating position and with the height of these door panels. You can kind of rest your elbow here on the door panel and drive this casually like an old school Land Cruiser, which I really appreciate. We touched earlier on the massages being a little bit disappointing, and they are, but what I do like about the massage is that it's a one-touch, one-click button, physical, on the side of the seat. So that's cool. You can just have your massage right away in one click, and then if you want to make more adjustments, you can do that in the infotainment. So the lumbar goes out pretty far, but come on, I want a good like Brookstone massage chair massage when I'm in a big flagship like this. All right, guys, we're gonna pull in here and we're gonna show you some of these new camera systems on the QX80, and we'll wrap up with a sound system demo on this Klipsch 24 speaker 3D sound system. So my massaging seat just came on by itself again. So I guess I'm just getting a massage for the rest of the video. The car is maybe telling me I'm a bit tense. I don't think there is a single element of this car that reminds me even remotely of the 2024 and prior QX80. I mean, there's nothing. I don't think there's a single thing in here. Which in some ways may be good, some ways may be bad. permission to say I missed the 5.6 liter. Ugh. I was trying to get through the video without saying that. Pulling into a bit of a parking lot situation now. Let's show you some of the different cameras that we have here on this new QX80. This is kind of a big thing that they're showing off. And what I love about the cameras is they are a physical button. And you get a ton of different options here. The most notable one being the invisible hood camera, which is this one, right? Is that what yeah, okay. So this is what they call the invisible hood. So the point of this is you can see almost under the car, but there's no camera under the car. The way this works is it gathers data from prior recordings on the car from the front of the camera, and it projects them onto the screen as a view under the car, if that makes sense. The coolest thing about this is you can expand it to go to the cluster screen as well, but you still have that partition there in the middle, so you do lose a little bit of view there. I mean, it isn't really anything notable. It's more so just kind of ugly in the way that it splits it, but huge camera view. I mean, not to mention obviously the steering wheel blocks some of it as well, but that's a pretty cool camera view. And then you can also just kind of do a regular front camera, which has 170 degree view, so it is pretty wide, and you can expand that as well to the cluster. So it's pretty good camera situations. You also have a 3D camera. You can see here I'm pulled nose into this parking spot. Let's jump back on the road, give you a quick demo of this Klipsch 3D sound system. In fact, before we do that, let's do one last little walk around to the car. We'll show you guys what it looks like, and then we'll do the sound system test, and we will let you go for the day. Some final thoughts on the QX80. It's been a good day with this car, and I think I kind of cursed myself from the start because I was such a big fan of the outgoing car because it still had that charm, it still had that character and that soul of an old 04 Rich style SUV. And the reality of it is, this isn't that. And I knew it wouldn't be that, but I was holding out hope just a little bit that it would have some of that soul. This car fits into the class now as it is. It doesn't feel like a dinosaur anymore. I think they've done a great job with this air suspension, with the adaptive dampers. I think the styling is great. It's mature. They played it a little bit safe, but that's not always a bad thing. It's got plenty of torque, and you know, it gets the job done. So, cool guys. All right, well, if this is where you want to end the video, thank you all so much for watching. And let me know in the comments what you think of the QX80, and if you have any questions, make sure you leave those for me as well. We're going to jump in, do a quick sound system test, and that'll wrap it up for us today. So if you're headed out now, thank you guys all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Take care. All right. So we have a fair amount of adjustment here for this 24 speaker Klipsch sound system. We of course have our bass, mid, and treble, and you can also toggle on different levels of surround. So there's a DJX surround and a DJX 3D surround. We'll show you how both of those work and how they sound, of course. So let's hit the road for one last time and listen to this sound system. I think where the sound system really shines is when you pump it all the way up to the DJX 3D surround. That's what this is really tuned for, and I think they've almost gone, dare I say, a little bit too artificial. I think that they've tried so hard to make a statement with this Klipsch sound system that they've kind of lost a little bit of the nice organic sound they had with the old Bose system that was in the outgoing car. I'm not for a second saying that this sounds bad. I think that this is a very complex, a very powerful sound system, and you know, if you're someone that likes to listen to more complex music and someone that likes to listen to things really loud, then this would be a really good sound system for you.
I think it's a really, really impressive sound system for the average person. We were talking about this off camera, but the Bauer and Wilkins is still a little bit of the gold standard.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah, and here we're gonna just pull off here for a sec, but with as much as they were kind of hyping this sound system up, I was hoping that it was gonna blow me out of the water, and like I was like really looking forward to listening to this sound system. And it's good. Don't get me wrong. It's a good system, but I definitely don't think it quite gets up to the level of a Bowers & Wilkins in a BMW product or a Volvo product. I would say that it's comparable to the Mark Levinson in the new Lexus LX. And I'm excited to spend some more time in the QX80 and listen to this sound system a little bit more, give you guys some more driving impressions once I have actually lived with the car. But that's gonna wrap it up today for our first impressions drive here on the QX80. Thanks to Mason for hanging out with me and tagging along in the video.
Yeah.
It was a good time, and we're going to enjoy the rest of our time out here in Napa Valley. But that's going to wrap it up for us today, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Take care.